Hello students, welcome to Legacy IAS Academy. Today we are going to discuss about a very interesting topic that has been news for past few days. As you might know, a movie has been released regarding the life of Shaheed Udham Singh, who was an Indian revolutionary. So today we are going to delve deeper into why he became Udham Singh and what was the reason and what were the events that have unfolded in the history of India that contributed in Udham Singh becoming the revolutionary in India. The first of these events was the Rowlatt Act. The Rowlatt Act was also called as Anarchical and Revolutionary Crimes Act of 1919, and it was a Legislative Council Act that was passed by Imperial Legislative Council on 18th March 1919. The reason why it is called as Rowlatt Act, because Sir Sidney Rowlatt, who was an English judge, who you can see in the picture also, was actually the president of this committee that is called as Rowlatt Committee. And the reason why British government had set up this committee with the purpose to evaluate political terrorism in India, especially in the provinces of Bengal and Punjab, and the impact of such kind of political terrorism and their possible links with the German government and the Bolsheviks in Russia. Now students, this act was brought in 1919, and you might know that this was a time when World War II was ending. So the British government had actually observed that by the end of World War II in India, the revolutionary movement or revolutionary activities had picked up quite a pace. They have gathered momentum, and as per the British government, they have found that the main reason behind the increase in the activities of such group is because of the support, the both covert and overt, they were getting from the German government as well as the Bolsheviks in Russia. So that is why they wanted to tighten the screws over this kind of political momentum. But the problem with this Rowlatt Act, we can understand from the provisions that were given here. So it was a very draconian kind of act, and we can understand this from the fact that first provisions of Rowlatt Act was that it gave powers to the police to arrest any person without any reason whatsoever. Apart from that, it also aimed at stricter control of the press. Apart from that, Rowlatt Act also made a provision that any person can be arrested without any warrant. The person arrested can be held in indefinite detention without giving a chance for any trial, as well as they have provision of juryless in-camera trials for proscribed political acts. So due to such grave nature or grave provisions of this act, the Indian political we can say momentum or Indian political leaders were very much astounded, and the impact was very much we can say impact was seen all across the political spectrum of India, or all across the revolutionary spectrum of India, we can say political movement of India. The Mahatma Gandhi was very critical or extremely critical of the act, because he believed that all people cannot be punished for some this isolated political crimes of some individuals. But also we need to keep in mind that it was this political Rowlatt Act that caused or brought Mahatma Gandhi to the mainstream of Indian struggle for independence, and from here ushered in an era that we called as Gandhian era of Indian politics or Indian national movement that prevailed for next 2 decades till India got independence. Apart from this, we also see opposition of this act by Madan Mohan Malviya and Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who were the members of Imperial Legislative Council, and against this act, protesting against the act, they resigned from their position. If we talk about the common sentiment of people all across the India, so the people were engaged in several hartals and strike, and the violent activities even began, like such as riots in the provinces of Punjab, Delhi and Gujarat. Now coming to the second important event that has that occurred subsequently Rowlatt Act, or this was the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. So before understanding, we need to understand the chronology that had led to Jallianwala Bagh massacre. So what happened that due to promulgation of Rowlatt Act, people were protesting, rioting everywhere in the country, and especially in Punjab, this protest was much more violent, because the Punjab was hotbed of revolutionary terrorism, or you can say revolutionary activities in India, and that is why the people disrupted railway lines, telegraphs and communication systems in Punjab. So the one such event has happened on 10th of April 1919, when there were people went to the residence of Miles Irving, who was the Deputy Commissioner of Amritsar, and were protesting at his residence because two of the Indian movement leaders, national movement leaders were arrested at his residence. Then on 11th of April 1919, Marcella Sherwood, who was an elderly English missionary, she got worried due to this violent nature of this protest, and she was going back to her home when she was violently attacked by a mob. This incident actually angered General Dyer, and he, to take revenge, or we can say against this act, he actually gave a crawling order, and he made all these people who were at the streets to crawl on the streets that you can see from the picture here. The reason given by General Dyer was simple, that Indian people trust in their gods, and these people crawl along these gods, crawl against their gods. So that is why they need to crawl like this, so they understand that the British woman is nothing short of God. Then on 12th April 1919, the Hartal leaders met up in Amritsar and announced that on next subsequent day, that is on 13th of April, a public protest would be held against the promulgation of Rowlatt Act in the Jallianwala Bagh. Now, upon receiving this news, on 13th of April 1919, Reginald Dyer was convinced that a major insurrection could take place, and he banned all the meeting. He said the public meeting could not take place and a martial law was in place. The problem was that this order was not widely distributed, and people were not aware. A lot of people were actually not aware that such order is in place. So that is why by mid-afternoon, thousands of Indians had gathered in the Jallianwala Bagh to celebrate that day Hindu and Sikh festival, very famous festival of Baisakhi, and also to peacefully protest against the arrest and deportation of two national leaders that we discussed before. One of them was Satyapal, that you can see from the picture here, and other of them was Saifuddin Kichlu. Both of them had been arrested, detained, and were taken to some secret location. Now, once these people started to arrive in a big numbers in Jallianwala Bagh, and this, as per the estimate or the survey conducted by General Dyer, he believed that more than 6,000 people, somewhere in the range of 6,000 to 10,000 people have gathered in the Jallianwala Bagh. So upon knowing this, he arrived at the Bagh with a group of 50 troops, including 25 Gurkhas or 1x9 Gurkha rifles, 25 Pathans and Baluch, and 59 Sindh rifles. Now, many historians believe that the reason why General Dyer picked this group of people or these battalions was because they have always proven their loyalty to the British Empire, and General Dyer believed that they will not hesitate in following any orders he will give them. So that is why upon reaching there, we can understand that Jallianwala Bagh was actually a kind of garden that was surrounded by wall from all the sides, and were having very few 4 or 5 tiny gates. So when General Dyer reached with his troops, he started and he ordered his troops to begin shooting toward the densest section of the crowds in front of the available narrow exits, where the panic crowds were trying to leave the Bagh. And it was during this time that we know an incident where there was a well within the Jallianwala Bagh, and many people, being panicked and want to save themselves from bullet, actually jumped inside the well of the Bagh. Many people got injured and many people died instantly. The problem was that the people who were injured and remained within the Bagh or within the well could not be taken to the hospital for this treatment urgently, because the martial law was in order or in place, and that is why the only time where they were taken to the hospitals was in the next day, but till then it was already very late. So during this time, this incident is called as Jallianwala Bagh Massacre, and as per British government estimate, they said that almost 200 people were killed in this incident. But the Indian National Congress was not convinced, and later on an independent survey was conducted, where it was found that more than 1,500 people were there who actually got killed due to this senseless activities of General Dyer. Here, one more interesting thing you should know, that there are two persons here. One is General Dyer, who was directly responsible for giving a shooting order, and the other person was Michael O'Dwyer. During this incident of Jallianwala Bagh, he was actually the Lieutenant Governor of Punjab, and later on the inspection, or later on when this Lala Lajpat Rai returned back to India, he actually went deep into this incident, and he found that Lieutenant Governor O'Dwyer was equally responsible for this senseless massacre, because it is believed that Colonel Dyer or General Dyer called O'Dwyer before giving such orders, and O'Dwyer gave his nod or gave his approval on such kind of these killing orders. Now, let us try to understand that where was Udham Singh and how this event had affected the Udham Singh. So, first if you look at little background about Udham Singh was born Sher Singh actually on 26 December 1899 at a small village of Sunam in the then princely estate of Patiala. His father was Tahal Singh, who used to work as a watchman on a railway crossing in the nearby village. But his father died in a very young age when he was almost 7 years old, and that is why he was admitted in Amritsar to Central Khalsa Orphanage in year 1907. During this time, when he was in the Central Khalsa Orphanage, he was administered the Sikh initiatory rites, and then he received a new name of Udham Singh. Now, if you look at the early activities of Udham Singh, he was actually present in the Jallianwala Bagh on the fateful Baisakhi day of 13th April 1919, and it is believed that he was the one who was distributing water to the people who had gathered there, to the protesters who had gathered there. But this unfortunate event of killing of so many people had a very significant impact on the mind of Udham Singh, and he used to recall this event with very much anger and sorrow, and this was the event that turned him toward the path of revolution against the British Empire. Then after some time he left India and went to the United States of America, where he was very thrilled to learn about the militant activities of the Babar Akalis in the early 1920s. Then after spending some time to the United States, he came in contact with Bhagat Singh and returned home. It is said that when he was coming back from US to India, Bhagat Singh asked him to bring some arms and ammunitions, and that is what he was carrying when he was caught upon his arrival to India, and then was sentenced to 4 years imprisonment under the Arms Act. Few years later, when he was released in 1931, he returned to Amritsar and opened a shop as a signboard painter, where he assumed the name of Ram Muhammad Singh Azad. Now, student, this name is very, very important, because this is the name Udham Singh has used when he was arrested after he assassinated Michael O'Dwyer in the later period of life when he was in England. The significance of this name lies in the fact that as per some historians, it is believed that this Ram, Muhammad, Singh, these three are the name of three major religions in the Punjab that time: Hindu, Muslim and Sikh, and he wanted to portray a sense of unity among all the religions of the country who were fighting a common enemy of the British government. And Azad was the name he has taken to portray the nature of independence that he had in the mind from the British Empire or from the British government. It is also known that upon coming in contact with Bhagat Singh, he was deeply influenced by his activities and the revolutionary group activities, and he used to refer Bhagat Singh as a guru. Apart from this, he was also very fond of Ram Prasad Bismil and used to sing a lot of devotional songs. The reason why we know that he was very fond of Bhagat Singh, because one incident is there when after spending some time in Amritsar, he was going to Kashmir, and during this journey when he was arrested, in his bag the police actually found a portrait of Bhagat Singh. Then as police was keeping a very heavy tab on his activities in India, it became very difficult for him to live in India and take part in certain activities, and that is why he reached England by the mid-30s. And after reaching or upon reaching England, he was constantly on a lookout for any opportunity he can have so that he can avenge the Jallianwala Bagh tragedy. And on 3rd March 1940, such an opportunity arose, and he came to know that in Caxton Hall of London, a meeting of East India Association was being held in conjunction with the Royal Central Asian Society. And the good thing is that Michael O'Dwyer, who was the governor or lieutenant governor of Punjab at the time of Jallianwala Bagh massacre, was scheduled to speak at this meet. Now, students, one thing you should keep in mind, that there is during his writings and letters which we have found or found from Udham Singh, he has referred O'Dwyer as O'Dyer. So many historians believe that he might have confused General Reginald Dyer, who was the one who was directly responsible for shooting of the people in Jallianwala Bagh, with the Michael O'Dwyer, who was actually governor, lieutenant governor at that time. So there is a probability that he might have confused between these two. This thing is still not yet clear. Anyway, so when he learned that Michael O'Dwyer is going to speak at this meeting, he went to a bar where he bought a pistol, and then he put his pistol in a book where the pages were carved in the shape of pistol, and then sneaked these pistols in this assembly. And when Michael O'Dwyer was going to deliver his speech, he fired 5 to 6 shots from his pistol, and O'Dwyer was shot in the chest and heart, where he died instantly, while at the same time the Jetland or Lord Jetland, who was Secretary of State for India, who was presiding over the meeting, he was also injured. Then Udham Singh was overpowered with a smoking revolver, but he did not in fact made any attempt to escape and continued saying that what he has done as his duty by his country. Now, following this incident, on 1st April 1940, Udham Singh was formally charged with the murder of Sir Michael O'Dwyer, and on 4th June 1940, he was committed to trial at the Central Criminal Court in the Old Bailey before Justice Atkinson, who sentenced him to death. An appeal, however, was filed on his behalf, but this appeal was dismissed on 15 July 1940. Then on 31st July 1940, Udham Singh was finally hanged in a Pentonville prison in London. Now, from some recent discoveries or some recent letters that have been discovered by the historians, that letter which he has written to Shiv Singh Johal, his friend, during his days in prison following assassination of Michael O'Dwyer. Now, these letters show him as a man of great courage with a sense of humor. Okay, and we can see from this fact, by this fact, that he used to call himself in this letter as a guest of His Majesty King George, and he looked upon death as a bride he was going to wed. But by remaining cheerful to the last and going joyfully to the gallows, he followed the example of Bhagat Singh, who had been his beau idol. Now, during the trial, Udham Singh actually had requested the British government that after his death, his ashes be sent back to his country, but this, however, was not allowed. However, after independence of India, in year 1975, the government of India, at the instance of Punjab government, his remains were exhumed and repatriated to India. And when these remains were brought to India, Prime Minister herself, Indira Gandhi, Gyani Jail Singh were there to receive the remains, and apart from them, there are lakhs of people also gathered on the occasion so that they can pay homage to the memory of Shaheed Udham Singh. Later on, Udham Singh was cremated in his birthplace of village Sunam, and his ashes were scattered in the Satluj river. However, some of his ashes still were retained, and these retained ashes are still kept inside sealed urn at Jallianwala Bagh. So, students, that was a brief overview about Shaheed Udham Singh and the brief background related with him. I hope you all have enjoyed the session. That is all for today. Thank you very much.